Hello and welcome to Slightly Spoiled. My name is Elise, and today I'm talking about a book that I just read that everybody else read 25 years ago. I'll give myself a pass for not having read it then because I'm 26, so I was unable to read at the time. Also, the themes are mature, okay? There's some violence, there's some really dark stuff going on in this book, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's not appropriate for babies. And let me tell you, this book holds up. And I'm talking, of course, about Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is the first book in the Robert Langdon series, which I think is best known for The Da Vinci Code, the second book. I've talked to multiple people about the fact that I'm reading this book, and they have told me that they also thought that Angels and Demons came after The Da Vinci Code. I think part of that is that The Da Vinci Code was the huge book, like the big bestseller. Also, the movie came out first. They did Da Vinci Code, then Angels and Demons, so it's all confusing, but this book came first. We will get to the Da Vinci Code, I promise, because I loved this book and I will be continuing the series. I somehow was not spoiled whatsoever on this series. The only thing I knew going in was that there's kind of a National Treasure-esque vibe, and that was definitely true, and I absolutely ate it up. There's something so fun about like running around a big city with old architecture and like being in the middle of history and solving puzzles and it's just so much fun. It's like a 500-page book, give or take, depending on your edition, and completely action-packed the whole way through. It's kind of nuts. So there was no way I was doing this all in one part. I split it in half pretty much exactly, and I think I found a really good stopping point. So this today is going to be part one. In case it wasn't clear, I'm going to be fully spoiling this book, okay? Rehashing every little aspect of the plot. So this is more of a, maybe you read this book multiple decades ago and you want to relive it a little bit, or you're never going to read the book and you just kind of want to know what the fuss is about. I will do my best to convey that to you. If you are thinking of reading this book, save this video for later. There's a lot of talk in this book about the Illuminati, which I knew a little bit about. You know, I went through a conspiracy theory YouTube video phase in high school. Who didn't? But there's a lot of information about the Illuminati given in little bursts. So I consolidated that so we can talk about it up front and then just get into the thick of the plot. Back in the 16th century, the Catholic Church was dominant in Europe, and they did not really like when people spoke out in opposition to the church, which was a problem because they had teachings that we now know to not be true, like the theory that everything revolves around the earth. There was a group of scientists, including Galileo. Yes, that Galileo, he plays a major part in this book, which I was very surprised about. And they founded something called the Church of Illumination, which is essentially the Illuminati. And these people just basically wanted to discuss scientific ideas and talk about them, even if they were in opposition to the church, because obviously science is all about learning the truth of things. And most of these men were Catholic themselves. They didn't believe that science disproved religion or the other way around. They wanted these things to work in harmony because, you know, science is so amazing because God made it that way. And obviously the church didn't take kindly to this, even though this group was not, you know, satanic or anti-Catholic. And so they ultimately made an example of known Illuminati members. Ultimately, the Illuminati had to kind of go into hiding. They fled Italy, grouped up with other people who had been kind of cast out of the Catholic Church, and they ultimately joined the Freemasons, or kind of hid within their ranks, were able to grow their numbers and masquerade sort of as Freemasons. Over centuries, the Illuminati morphed into something that it was not originally, which is a satanic cult, and they were basically the enemy of the Catholic Church and wanted nothing more than the destruction of the Vatican. The last known Illuminati activity was like over 400 years ago. Again, all of my friends, brothers and sisters who were on conspiracy theory TikTok know that there are constantly rumors and speculations about celebrities who are part of the Illuminati, but that is obviously not confirmed. And that brings us to our main man, Mr. Robert Langdon, someone who is very skeptical that the Illuminati has existed within the last 400 to 500 years. This man is a 40-year-old Harvard professor. He teaches art history. He's also a former competitive diver. He swims a bunch of laps every single morning. He's like known at the school to be this insanely fit man. Dan Brown needs us to know that Robbie keeps it tight, okay? He stays in shape. He's a fine specimen, 40-year-old single former athlete, hot, okay? Tell me why Tom Hanks plays him in the movie. I'm not trying to be a hater, but when I read the description of this man, I was expecting normal average Joe, maybe slightly nerdy professor, which he is, but Tom Hanks does not give 40-year-old athlete in, I think it's like 2006, when the Da Vinci Code movie came out. In Hollywood, men can kind of be whatever age, like they get away with it. Also, it's all about casting a big star. But was Tom Hanks really like the best we could do? My brain was trying so hard to picture Tom Hanks in this role, and I was fighting it as much as I possibly could. Since you ask, it was more of an Indiana Jones, like young Harrison Ford slash Jonathan Bailey in the new Jurassic World movie, which I have not seen, but I've seen the trailer and those vibes are correct. So that was the movie in my head. I'm gonna struggle watching the adaptation, which I probably will do eventually. This is not Tom Hanks in my mind. He's a good actor, but is he that good? I say no. Outside of being a professor and a hottie, Robert Langdon is one of the leading experts in religious symbology, which brings him to get a mysterious phone call one night or one morning, it's 5:18 in the morning, from a man who says that he needs Robert Langdon and his expertise. And he's like, no thanks, I'm good. Soon after that, he receives a fax that stops him in his tracks. Okay, Dr. Seuss, the fax depicts something very graphic. Okay, it is a dead body, fully naked, I believe, and branded into the chest is the word Illuminati. But not just the word, my friends, it is the symbol. The thing that's so special about this Illuminati symbol is that it is an ambigram, which means it is the same upside down. You can have it on a piece of paper, flip the piece of paper over, and it looks exactly the same both ways. This brings me to a couple of the things that the Illuminati loves, sort of the aesthetics of the Illuminati, if you will. They love symmetry. And the number two, they believed in the duality of all things. Black and white, good and evil. It's like yin and yang, essentially. They also have a lot of symbols that represent them. One of them is the eye in the triangle, which is on the American dollar. And we talk a little bit about that. That is because there were a lot of Freemasons in our early US government, and therefore they used that symbol because it was known to be a symbol of Freemasons, but it's also technically tied to the Illuminati. And they also use the pentagram, which is a common satanic symbol. And they love the number 5 as a result. So again, number 2, number 5, those are big in the Illuminati. Another foundational belief of the Illuminati is that the entire universe is made up of only 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And they refer to these as the 4 ancient elements of science. There have long been rumors of these ambigrams of the word Illuminati and then also of the 4 ancient elements of science, but nobody has ever seen them. Robert Langdon does not believe that the Illuminati has been active for centuries, but how, if they are inactive and if they've all died out, did they get their hands on this brand? He picks up the fax receiver and he's like, okay, who are you? How'd you get this number? And the guy's like, well, I got it on the World Wide Web, baby, on your website for your book. There's a period of time, I think right after something like this would come out, where it just seems regular dated. And then it comes back around to being like glamorous and cool. You know how wired headphones kind of came back in? Like for a while, no one wanted to be seen with a wire. And now it's cool again because it's retro. That's how I feel about reading about, a fax machine, or whenever they mention the internet or the World Wide Web in this book, it's like a mic drop. Like, yeah, I used that. I bet you know nothing about it. The guy on the other end is still being mysterious, but he says that he is a physicist who works at a research facility and that he found this dead body and reached out to Robert Langdon because he knows a lot about the Illuminati and hopefully he can look into what is going on. Robert says, okay, fine, you got me. I'm interested. I want to know about this Illuminati. Like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. What should I do? And the man on the fax machine says, okay, I'll send a plane to you. Now, this is where the book gets a little bit sci-fi, which I was not expecting. Langdon hops on this plane and it takes 1 hour to get him from Boston or Cambridge to Geneva, Switzerland. He arrives at this research facility and it's called CERN, or CERN, which is a French acronym that translates to the European Council for Nuclear Research. Okay, he's never heard of this place, but apparently it's a really big deal. Americans don't know about it because they pretend that they invented everything that is invented at CERN, which honestly tracks. He meets the man who called him, of course, and his name is Maximilian Kohler, the Director General of CERN. And this man is kind of hilarious. He is bald and he's in this electric wheelchair that goes so fast. So as he's giving him a tour of CERN, Langdon is just kind of chasing him around. He's having a hard time keeping up with this zippy wheelchair. Kohler also has a reputation for being a major jerk to his colleagues. Like, he is a super genius and runs a tight ship around here, but they call him the Viper because he's so deadly. Like, he just does not treat people well. And so he's showing Langdon around and they ultimately end up at a man named Leonardo Vitra's office. And we learn that this is the man in the photo. They walk into the office. It is freezing cold in there to preserve the body. And Kohler tells Langdon a little bit about this man. He was a particle physicist and also a Catholic priest, and he was a big believer in essentially the early Illuminati principles of science and religion working hand in hand. One quote that he lived by is, "Science and religion are not at odds. Science is simply too young to understand." We also learned that Kohler has not contacted any authorities, no police, no nothing, because he doesn't want that bad press for CERN, and he also doesn't want that to impede the investigation that he hopes Langdon will do into this Illuminati murder. Langdon goes to take a closer look at the body and sees that one of the eyeballs has been removed. Very yucky, if you ask me. We also learned that Leonardo had an adopted daughter named Vittoria. She's on her way here in a helicopter, obviously distraught because her father just died suddenly, was murdered. And immediately when we see Vittoria, it's very clear that she is a love interest. She's very hot, she's mysterious, she's Italian, and we find out the size of her breasts upon a first impression, which is very Stephen King of Dan Brown. If you're wondering, they're small and her torso is slender. So very cool for her. Vittoria is also a physicist, and she was working with her father on a top secret project in a highly secure lab. And so she takes both Langdon and Kohler to go see this lab. They've been creating antimatter, which when I was reading this book made total sense to me, and I could not possibly begin to explain it to you. This book does that thing a lot where one character, usually Vittoria, will explain something in like really technical scientific terms, and then another character, usually Kohler, who understands what she's saying, will translate it into layman's terms for the reader, and also for Robert Langdon, because, you know, he's a religious symbologist. He is not a physicist. This technique is always a little clunky when it's used in media, and it's used quite a bit, but I also can't fault Dan Brown for using it because it's a complex topic, and I think I came away knowing enough of the basics to get the plot. Antimatter is like the negative of all matter that we know in our world, and theoretical physicists have long speculated that this exists, but Vittoria and her dad were able to actually create it, and it is more powerful than any explosive on this planet, okay? So they have this teeny tiny little piece. She does a little demonstration with a teeny piece of it. They're very impressed, and then she says that there's actually another secret lab hidden below that has a much larger piece of antimatter. In fact, it is a full quarter of a gram, which has the capability of obliterating everything within a half-mile radius. It's stable in the lab because it's sitting on this charger thing that essentially keeps the antimatter suspended in the canister. But if it is removed from this charger, it will have 24 hours before it essentially explodes. She's explaining all of this, not noticing that Kohler and Langdon are kind of freaking out a little bit. Why are they doing that? Well, because the top secret high security situation is actually a retinal scan, which I believe was like a sci-fi concept at this time. I think that's real now, right? There are 4 retinas that can gain access to this lab, and one of those is missing at the moment. And another thing, Langdon and Kohler noticed that on the little retinal scan lens, there was a little bit of blood. Uh-oh. They say, "Hey, Vittoria, can we see that super secret lower lab that you were talking about?" She's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, of course you guys can." And they're freaking out. And as they walk up, it becomes clear that their suspicions are correct. There is blood all over this lens, and the eyeball is on the floor. The eyeball's on the floor, you guys. Vittoria sees her daddy's eyeball on the ground. Nobody wants to see that. And surprise, surprise, when they enter that lower lab, the canister is nowhere to be seen. And the charger is still there. I don't even think that someone could take it with them if they wanted to, but there is no other charger like that in the world. And again, once it's removed, which we don't know exactly when that was, 24 hours, and boom, to everything within a half-mile radius. Vittoria and her dad took a vow of silence. So as far as she knows, no one else knows about this. And she's also feeling incredibly guilty because she was the one who talked her dad into creating this quarter-gram piece of antimatter. He really didn't want to. He thought, because you can't destroy it once it's created, just like real matter. And he was scared of the implications of it. And she was like, "We have to do it just so we can know the limitations of this." And it seems like as a result of that, he has been murdered. The book is entirely told from an omniscient perspective, and usually we're following Robert Langdon and Vittoria by extension because she's usually with him, but every now and then we get a chapter from another perspective, and one of those perspectives is the killer of Leonardo Vitra. He is a direct descendant and very proud to be a direct descendant of the Ashashin, which is spelled like assassin with an H in front of it, but Aaron was listening to the audiobook and he corrected me that it's pronounced Ashashin, so I will be saying it that way. The Ashashin was a known enemy of the Vatican many years ago. We learned very quickly that this person is responsible for murdering Leonardo Vitra, branding him, removing his eye, and breaking into the lab to steal the antimatter canister. This book is a little bit dated because it came out 25 years ago. And as I was saying about the technology, it's usually in a fun way, like hearing about fax machines and the web. And Robert talks about how his college students are just always talking about Madonna. Like, it's kind of fun. But there's one way in which the dating of this book, the datedness, is not fun, and that is the culturally insensitive, in my opinion, treatment of this descendant of the Ashashin. He's frequently described as Arab by other characters, or they talk about the color of his skin. He's vaguely Middle Eastern. We're in his perspective sometimes, basically, and we have no idea where he's from. It's just like a vague Middle Eastern country. He has a vague Middle Eastern accent. He is like the only person who's not white in this book, with one exception. There's a black woman who is a very, very minor character, but it's just interesting how the person that is not white is also the most evil by far. Like, he is not morally gray whatsoever. He commits a murder. He is stealing this explosive device, ostensibly for a terrorist attack of some sort. The night of the murder, he pays to get a prostitute, and he has these really gross fantasies about forcing himself on her and murdering her. Like, he's just a disgusting human being. And so it's just interesting how this is the one person that's like not American or European. It's not really great, okay? He's also not the mastermind behind this. He's taking orders from someone that we don't know the identity of, and he doesn't even know the identity of, but they're named Janice or Janice, I don't know. And he is just on the phone with him and basically called to action, and very honored to be called to action because he's getting to play out his role as a descendant of the Ashashin. Switching to another point of view, we get a security guard of some unknown place, but he's watching camera feeds, and he notices that one of the cameras is in a different place, like it's been removed and placed somewhere else, and there is a mysterious capsule on the camera feed. Uh-oh. Back to our Robert, Vittoria, and Kohler point of view. Kohler gets a call from the Swiss Guard, who are the ones who protect the Vatican, and they say, you need to get someone here right now. Your organization is involved in something very mysterious. And so Robert and Vittoria hop on that really fast Mach 15 plane to go to Vatican City. Kohler has to stay behind because, unfortunately, since he found Leonardo Vitra's body this morning, he's been go, 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 calling Langdon, like racing around the place. And he has some pretty severe like medical issues from an accident in his childhood, and we ultimately do learn about it, but I'll save that for later. He has to take medication really, really often, and it's administered by his secretary, but he hasn't been in the office, so they haven't been able to administer it to him, and he like can't even breathe. He has to be taken to the hospital, stays behind in Geneva, while Robert and Vittoria jet set to the Vatican. They land and then are taken into a Vatican helicopter operated by a member of the Swiss Guard. And this is the beginning of a whole hullabaloo about Vittoria wearing shorts, okay? Her exposed legs are a major drama, and I understand, like, it's the Catholic Church, okay? It's a big deal, but also there's a lot happening right now, and we spend a lot of time worrying about this woman's kneecaps being exposed. There's also such a weird moment when this member of the Swiss Guard is patting them down, you know, making sure that they're not carrying anything that can't be taken into the Vatican. And it says, and I quote, Langdon had already decided that Vittoria's form-fitting shorts and blouse were not bulging anywhere they shouldn't have been. What a gentleman. Say what you want about Robert Langdon, but that man, he's always got an eye for security, okay? And we love that about him. It all comes together when we find out that the Swiss Guard called CERN because there was a capsule on one of their camera feeds that said CERN on the side of it. It's in Vatican City somewhere, and whoever placed it there is taunting the Swiss Guard by putting a camera feed on it, but they don't know where that camera feed is. And by the way, there is a countdown on the side of this capsule, and it says just under 6 hours until the antimatter explodes, which just so happens to be at midnight on the dot, okay? So very dramatic. I would expect nothing less from the Illuminati. We meet the head officer of the Swiss Guard. His name is Olivetti, and this guy sucks, okay? This guy is terrible at his job, and he's like so arrogant about how good he is at his job, which is a lethal combination. And Vittoria is trying to explain to him what this capsule is, and he's like, antimatter, never heard of it. I am an expert in every explosive that exists, and you're just some dumb woman who's making things up. And so he doesn't believe her. Also, there's a lot going on in the Vatican right now, babe. So I can't really be bothered with the fact that everyone's life is potentially in danger in the next 6 hours or so. What is Olivetti's top priority? I'm so glad you asked. It is conclave, which is happening in like an hour because the Pope died of a stroke 15 days ago. I loved the conclave aspect of this book because it's just objectively a really kind of weird and interesting thing that happens, and I never knew anything about it until this most recent one when I suddenly got really interested and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Reading this book and this aspect of this book, while that was all still fresh in my mind, top-notch experience. Outside of St. Peter's is obviously a media frenzy. On the inside, everything is top secret, but we do get the point of view of one of the cardinals named Cardinal Mortati. He is the great elector, which essentially means he is not eligible for the title of the Pope, and he has to comb over all of the really complicated rules and things that they have to do in the process of conclave and essentially conduct the votes. In his point of view chapters, we learn something very scary that the Swiss Guard is also secretly dealing with, which is that 4 of the cardinals have gone missing, and not any cardinals. They are known as the preferiti, which is the top 4 cardinals in the running to be the Pope. Any of these cardinals can be named Pope. The Pope that we have now is someone who was a major underdog and was not a part of the preferiti, but the top 4 going missing is a pretty bad scenario. And of course, Olivetti, the chief officer, is completely in denial. He's like, oh yeah, they probably just wandered off or something. How could they possibly wander off in the middle of this media circus and Vatican City and like top secret? It's just not very feasible. But of course, Olivetti thinks that his level of security that he provides is completely impenetrable. And clearly that's not true. So he's preoccupied with conclave and the 4 cardinals, and Langdon and Vittoria are like, hey, this is a really big deal. And they basically pull a, can I speak to your manager? Because he's just completely shutting them down. And his manager usually would be the Pope, of course, he's in charge. But since there's no Pope, there is someone called the Chamberlain, or in this book, usually referred to as the Camerlengo. The Camerlengo is someone who is not a cardinal. In this case, Carlo Ventresca, who is the Camerlengo for this Pope, is a lowly priest, okay? And so he is not eligible for the title of Pope, and that is how they want it. They want it to be someone who was trusted by the Pope. We learn eventually that he was essentially mentored by the Pope, and he's just there to kind of do the duties in the absence of a Pope until a new one is named. Olivetti's like, of course you can't talk to the Camerlengo. Are you crazy? He's busy preparing for conclave. So what does he do? He closes them in his office with a guard at the door. Vittoria's burden to bear in this book is that she is so smart and she solves every problem. She, in this room, is like, okay, duh, we're just gonna call the Camerlengo or the Pope's office. And Langdon's like, how are you gonna do that? You don't have his number. Well, we have a desk phone, baby. We can just press these speed dial numbers. And so they try a couple and it eventually does work. They get put through to the switchboard, transferred to the Camerlengo. Olivetti, once he realizes what's going on, barges in, but it is in fact too late. He snatches the receiver out of their hand and is immediately scolded by the Camerlengo. Like, of course, have them come see me. This sounds really important. So off they go to see the Camerlengo. There's a really funny moment when they walk in to see him where Olivetti's like, sir, I am so sorry that this woman is half naked in your presence. And the Camerlengo's like, I literally don't care at all. Everyone's lives are in danger and you didn't tell me. Like, that's what I'm mad about right now. They explain the whole situation to the Camerlengo. Obviously, he's freaking out. And there's kind of a big moment when Langdon describes the murder of Leonardo Vitra. He says it was done by the Illuminati, which up until now, he has been extremely skeptical because, again, there's been no evidence of the Illuminati for centuries, but he has been convinced. He is on the side of this is the Illuminati and we must stop them. This conversation gets interrupted by another member of the Swiss Guard who says, hey, we have some guy on the line. It's an untraceable call, but they're calling it a bomb threat, something called antimatter. And Olivetti's like, oh, brother, this again. That thing doesn't exist. And the Swiss Guard member's like, actually, yeah, I did look into it on the web. Okay, I looked into it and it's not looking good. This stuff seems like it's no joke. And Vittoria's like, That's what I tried to tell you. The Camerlengo, of course, is like, yeah, let me talk to this person. And of course, it's someone with a vaguely Middle Eastern accent. Who could that be? Olivetti is still on his high horse about this whole thing. He's like, no, it's highly secure up in here, actually. There's no way that anyone infiltrated our ranks. And the guy's like, then how come 4 of your cardinals are missing? And proceeds to list their names. He references something called La Purga, which happened in 1668. The church branded 4 members of the Illuminati, left their bodies around Rome, and used that as basically an example of what happens when you go against the church. And that's the plan for the 4 cardinals that they have in their custody, okay? So the first murder will happen 90 minutes from now on the hour at 8 o'clock. It's going to be in some church around Rome. They're going to be murdered and branded. And then another one is going to happen each hour in a different church, leading up to the antimatter explosion at midnight. The call ends abruptly, and this begins an excruciating push and pull between the Camerlengo and Olivetti. Just a constant argument that they're having. The Camerlengo says you need to evacuate conclave. You know, all of these cardinals are in danger. You need to get them out of here. And Olivetti says, I'm not doing that. We're going to find this canister. And the Camerlengo says, how are you going to do that? You don't have a plan for this, blah, blah, blah. Just give me a little more time. Just give me a little more time. It's completely impossible that this canister is anywhere in this church because our security is so good, okay? No one has ever infiltrated our security other than these 4 cardinals that went missing today. So clearly nothing's going on here. The Camerlengo ultimately says, I'll let you do what you want to do with your guys for now, but we're going to talk later, and we probably will need to evacuate unless you find that capsule. So Olivetti leaves. Then Langdon tells the Camerlengo that he needs access to the Vatican archive. He has some document that he feels like he needs to get so that he can find the first church, and it's just too much to explain right now. And the Camerlengo says, okay, fine, I'll have a guard meet you there. This document is called Diagramma. It was written and distributed by Galileo to many different scientists as essentially a scavenger hunt to find the Church of Illumination, or the Illuminati's secret meeting place. The legend has it that within the Illuminati, there was an anonymous artist who designed and built 4 different sculptures that were hidden around Vatican City so that it would ultimately lead the scientists to the Church of Illumination. These sculptures each made reference to one of the 4 ancient elements, and they also had to blend in with the rest of the Catholic architecture and sculptures in Rome. So they're going to be hard to find, but hopefully Diagramma will lead them to the first one, and then again, it'll be like dominoes. They'll lead to one another. There are a few reasons why Langdon thinks that this is all correlated. First of all, 4 sculptures, 4 cardinals. They also all are at churches, which is where the cardinals are supposedly going to be sacrificed. But the real reason is that each of these sculptures is referred to as an altar of science, which is something that the Illuminati guy on the phone happened to say. So it seems like these 4 altars of science are going to be the spots for the cardinal sacrifices. So of course, we need to figure out how to find those. Langdon and Vittoria arrive at the archives. They do a little bit of digging around and they figure out which vault Diagramma exists in. Of course, it is hermetically sealed, so it's going to be really hard to breathe in. They only have 20 minutes before the oxygen runs out because there's no one currently manning the filtration system. And it's also really dim and lit with a red light, which is for preservation, but it also just makes it so dramatic, don't you think? They dig around the vault for quite some time until Vittoria ultimately finds Diagramma, and they're flipping through the pages looking for a code, specifically something written in numbers, because it's supposedly going to be in, quote, la lingua pura in Italian, which just means pure language, and they assume that Galileo would consider the pure language to be math. But they actually find something in the margins. Once again, it's our girl Vittoria, and it is the quote, "The path of light is laid, the sacred test." This is confusing because it's English. It's not math, but Langdon realizes, oh wait, no one in the Vatican at this time really recognized English as a language. No one really spoke it. And so the pure language, according to the Illuminati, would maybe be a language that the Vatican wouldn't know. Langdon then notices that the line is an iambic pentameter, which is like the most Illuminati thing ever because it's 5 couplets, 5 and 2. They're 2 numbers, okay? It makes perfect sense. And Vittoria to this says, and I quote, "Iambic who? You're telling me that this genius, perfect woman never took a Shakespeare class. She never learned what iambic pentameter was. I think it's the same thing as the particle physics conversation where Dan Brown doesn't want his reader to feel stupid and feels the need to explain just in case people don't know. But like Vittoria would know what iambic pentameter was if she was a real person, and I stand by that. Vittoria turns the page different ways and notices that there's a line like this in each of the 4 margins, so it comes together to form one full poem, and you'll never guess who's credited as writing the poem. John Milton, author of Paradise Lost, and someone who has been long speculated to be a member of the Illuminati. I'm so curious what of this is real. There's like a disclaimer at the beginning of the book that says that all of the Illuminati history and like the architecture and everything is real in the book, but I genuinely don't know what is and isn't invented, and I chose not to look it up because I like my disbelief where it is. I think my reading experience was better for not knowing information, but I'm also like, did John Milton actually write the poem in this? Like, is it confirmed that he's in the Illuminati, or was this invented by Dan Brown? I don't even know if I want to know, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Here's the full poem that seemingly Galileo left as a clue to the path of illumination. From Santi's earthly tomb with demons whole, cross Rome the mystic elements unfold. The path of light is laid, the sacred test. Let angels guide you on your lofty quest. Gorgeous. Immediately when we see this poem, Langdon knows exactly where he's going based on that first line. So Santi's earthly tomb, Santi was the last name of Raphael, the famous painter. And so his tomb just so happens to be at the Pantheon, which is the oldest church in Rome. And then as far as the demon's hole portion, there is a hole in the very top of the Pantheon. So it's a perfect fit. Off they go to the Pantheon. On the way out, Vittoria snags Diagramma. She wants to take it with her, and Langdon is freaking out. He's like, absolutely not. We cannot take this. It is fragile. It is the last copy of this very important historical document. And she's like, no, we're going to need it later. And guess what? She saved the day with that. They're off to find the Swiss Guard and say, hey, we're going to the Pantheon. This is going to be the spot of the first murder. And the Swiss Guard actually comes to them very sweetly and decides to hold them at gunpoint, Olivetti's guys in particular, because they're like, you're not allowed to be in the Vatican archive. And Langdon's like, okay, dummy, the Camerlengo told me to go. Also, I have a lead, so you're probably going to want to hear it. Olivetti continues to be the worst contrarian ever, okay? He's like, no one would ever be so stupid as to plan something like that in the Pantheon. It's a huge building with one entrance. There's no way that somebody could discreetly kill someone in public like that. Vittoria is ready with scenarios, specific ones. And she lists off, well, actually, they could kill the person like this, and they could drop them in through the roof, or they could do this, or they could do that, until he's like, okay, stop. Say it with me. Thank you, Vittoria. Somebody needed to shut this man up. Once they get there, Olivetti's like, okay, we'll just kind of sit out here and wait. And Vittoria's like, are you crazy? They're gonna kill someone. I wanna go in there and see if I can stop it, see if I can figure out what's going on. Like, the person could be in disguise and get away before you even know that it was them. She convinces him to let her go in there and pretend to be a tourist, holding her phone and be like, hey, Joanne, oh yeah, it's so great. I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, and have basically eyes on the inside. Langdon is like, wait, you're gonna go in there? That's so dangerous. Let me go with you. And so they decide for Robert and Vittoria to pretend to be newlyweds, to walk in arm in arm, and we love a little fake dating, marriage of convenience situation. Okay, this part of the book actually made my skin crawl. I'm not even joking. I was so freaked. So they walk in at 7:50, 10 minutes to spare, and they look around a little bit together before deciding to kind of divide and conquer because it's such a huge room. Robert is approached by a man. The man decides that this is the perfect moment for a lengthy history chat, which of course Robert Langdon, nerd of the century, would be so down for any other time, but not right now. And it's like, is this a coincidence, or is this guy in the Illuminati? Meanwhile, across the room, Vittoria finds Raphael's tomb. She's taking a look at the plaque, reading the inscription, and goes, uh-oh, runs to Robert and says, I need to see Diagramma right now. So what's the problem, you ask? Well, Raphael was buried in a different tomb that was not in Rome for over 200 years before being transferred to the Pantheon in the year 1759. Diagramma was published in 1639. So over 100 years before Raphael was even buried in the Pantheon, this thing was published. Therefore, there's no way that that is what Galileo was alluding to. So they're obviously in the wrong place. And this man that I was positive was like a sinister Illuminatus is actually just a sweet art professor guy. And he actually does prove to be a little bit helpful because when he's talking about Raphael, he says the word architect, which leads Robert to have an epiphany because Raphael is best known for his painting, but he was also an architect, and he happened to design many, many tombs, like hundreds of them. That is what Galileo was getting at in Diagramma, not his actual resting place as his tomb, but his tomb, meaning a tomb that he designed for somebody else while he was alive and working as an architect. Luckily, our historian overhears them discussing the word demon's hole. This was a term that Langdon was not familiar with, and again, when he read the poem, he assumed that that was just referring to the hole at the top of the Pantheon, but apparently a demon's hole is actually a specific type of crypt that was often built underneath other tombs in churches so that family members of people who were buried in the churches and in the tombs who were not necessarily qualified to take up the valuable real estate in the tomb could still be buried with their family members. And it's kind of just like a hole in the ground where they would like very unceremoniously put the dead bodies of these family members. And so there is actually a church, one exactly in Rome, that was designed by Raphael and has a demon's hole. And it's a mile away, baby. We got to get going. They run out of the Pantheon and tell all of Eddie's guys, like, we got to go to Cheeky Chapel right now. And they pull up without a minute to spare. Okay. And as soon as they get there, it's like so obvious that this is the place. And Robert is totally beating himself up for jumping to conclusions about it being the Pantheon, because right away, like, he's seeing pyramids in here. He's seeing the zodiac painted on the ceiling, which is a pagan, system based on astronomy and not based on God and religion. Also, the chapel, which is called Cheeky Chapel now, used to be called literally Chapel of the Earth in Italian, which earth is the first of the 4 ancient elements of science. They get into the church. It was kind of difficult to do so. The door didn't work. They have to like climb in through this secret exit, and it's completely abandoned in there. Like, there's construction stuff and tarps everywhere. There's literally a rat running around and somebody left food in there. It's also completely dark, so they have a hard time kind of seeing around, but they ultimately find a hole in the ground with a ladder leading down, which seems to be the demon's hole. And Vittoria finds a blowtorch. That's their only means of light. And so Langdon kind of shines the blowtorch down in there, and they see what seems to be a dead body of one of the cardinals, but obviously he has to go down and check and see for himself. When Langdon reaches the bottom, it becomes clear they did not arrive in time to save the first cardinal. He is kind of halfway buried under the ground, which made them think that he was maybe still alive because he looked like he was standing up, but it's actually just that waist down, he was underground in the earth. Again, first ancient element. And that's also what he died from. He was suffocated with dirt in his mouth, which is like, oh my God, that's horrifying. And as the, dirt on top of the cake, because it's certainly not a cherry, he has a branding on his chest of the word earth. And it is an ambigram, just like the Illuminati symbol that was on Leonardo Vitra's chest. So it's clear that whoever branded that initial Illuminati brand also has the other brands that are kind of mythologized at this point. Nobody thought that they were actually real because they'd never seen them before, but we have seen now 2 of the 5 that were rumored to exist. Langdon climbs back up the ladder to share what he found. The Swiss guard is obviously pissed that he was wrong, and he's also really mad at himself that he's wrong. There is like a little bit of a silver lining though, that they guessed the wrong church, or not that they guessed the wrong church, but that it wasn't the Pantheon as they originally thought. Over a century ago, the Vatican removed all of the statues from the Pantheon, so it's very likely that had this been in the Pantheon, whatever the clue was to get to the next stop on the path of illumination would have been long disappeared. The sculptures are all very much still intact in this church, and not only that, but the sculptures are all designed by the artist Bernini. So they don't have to wonder anymore who that anonymous artist was who created the 4 sculptures along the path of illumination as well as the Illuminati brands. It was this artist Bernini, and so as they travel around Rome, they can kind of narrow down which sculptures are in the running as potential markers. He has many sculptures around Rome, so it doesn't narrow it down a ton, but now they know that they're looking for Bernini. There's really no time to stop and reflect on what just happened because another death is about to happen in 1 hour, and we need to find the clue to the next altar of science. So they start looking around at all of the different Bernini sculptures, and their eyes land on one that is called Habakkuk and the Angel, which both figures are literally pointing in different directions. What do we do? Well, remember the line from the poem, "Let angels guide you on your lofty quest." Hello? And the angel is pointing southwest. So that means that must be the direction of the next church. There's one final point of view that I haven't mentioned yet, or it's not a point of view. Again, it's omniscient, but two characters that a few chapters focus on that we haven't talked about. And these are reporters from BBC, specifically a reporter named Gunther Glick and his camerawoman, Chanita McCree. Gunther is new to BBC and he's like so bored of this whole conclave business because he used to work at the British Tatler, which was a gossip magazine. Like, this is just nothing in comparison to that. Until he gets a call from an anonymous man with a vaguely Middle Eastern accent. Can we guess who this may be? We're backtracking a little bit in time, by the way, but this man gives Gunther a tip that 4 cardinals are missing from conclave, which no one in the press knows, that the Illuminati are the ones who kidnapped these 4 cardinals, and that they are going to be murdered around town at various churches on the hour. But not only that, folks, he gives the location of the first murder. So of course, Chanita and Gunther go off to the Cheeky Chapel and they're waiting outside. While they're on the way, 4 Alfa Romeos drive past them super fast, and that is the Swiss Guard on their way from the Pantheon to the Cheeky Chapel. They wait outside. Obviously, they don't know what's going on in there until they see 4 soldiers come out with what seems to be a dead body. The dead body of the first cardinal. And what do you know, Chanita gets a nice little shot of that. So when the Illuminati said that these are going to be public executions, they didn't necessarily mean in the traditional sense. This first church was an abandoned one, but they still have orchestrated it in such a way that everyone is going to know about it soon enough. Now BBC has an exclusive photo of it, and it's only a matter of time before that gets published and is all over the news. But I'm gonna leave you guys with that, okay? That's a good stopping point. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. My next one this Friday will be another Love Island recap. And then the following Tuesday, so a week from today, we are gonna be doing part 2 of Angels and Demons. So I hope you guys will tune in for that. Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you are using to listen to me right now. And I hope you will let me talk your ear off again one day soon.